To some historians and critics, Kenyatta was not the heroic liberator he is often portrayed to be, but rather a calculated politician whose rise to power conveniently served the interests of the same colonial establishment Kenya was supposedly freed from. The making of a nationalist. Welcome back to our Bantu History series. In case you are new here, make sure you support us by hitting that subscribe button to receive our future videos. Jomo Kenyatta, Kenya's fraught founding father, the truth about a British colonial puppet. When the name Jomo Kenyatta is mentioned, many think of the man who led Kenya to independence in 1963 and became its first president. A father figure often hailed as Mzee wa Kazi, the elder of hard work. But beneath this glorified image lies a darker, more complicated truth. To some historians and critics, Kenyatta was not the heroic liberator he is often portrayed to be, but rather a calculated politician whose rise to power conveniently served the interests of the same colonial establishment Kenya was supposedly freed from. The making of a nationalist. Born as Kamau Wangengi in the early 1890s in Gatundu, Kiambu, Kenyatta grew up in the heart of Kikuyu country. During his youth, Kenya was already under British colonial domination. Like many Africans at the time, he sought education and economic advancement through mission schools, eventually becoming a teacher, carpenter, and interpreter. In the 1920s, Kenyatta joined the Kikuyu Central Association, KCA, an early organization resisting the alienation of African land by white settlers. This involvement brought him to prominence. Yet even at this stage, Kenyatta's activism was largely ethnic and reformist rather than revolutionary. He was more concerned with Kikuyu grievances than national liberation. By the late 1920s, Kenyatta had left for London as the KCA's representative. During his long stay abroad, almost 15 years, he studied anthropology at the London School of Economics. Under the British scholar Bronisław Malinowski, his 1938 book Facing Mount Kenya was praised in Britain for its academic tone, but it carefully avoided direct criticism of colonialism. Kenyatta learned how to navigate British intellectual circles, building relationships that would later help him gain political legitimacy in the eyes of the colonial authorities. The Mau Mau War and Kenyatta's convenient absence. By the early 1950s, Kenya was on fire. The Mau Mau Uprising, a violent rebellion by the Land and Freedom Army, was shaking the foundations of British rule. These guerrilla fighters, drawn mostly from the Kikuyu, fought and died in the forests for land and liberation. Kenyatta, who had returned to Kenya and become president of the Kenya African Union KAU, publicly condemned the Mau Mau movement. He distanced himself from the struggle, calling for peaceful negotiation while the fighters were being massacred, imprisoned, or hanged. In 1952, British authorities arrested Kenyatta, accusing him of being the leader to darkness and death, though there was little direct evidence linking him to the rebellion. His trial in Kapenguria was a colonial showpiece. The British sentenced him to 7 years imprisonment, followed by internal exile. Ironically, this imprisonment made him a symbol of resistance, though he had never fought in the forests nor endorsed the armed struggle. While true Mau Mau leaders like Dedan Kimathi were executed, Kenyatta was carefully preserved by the British, perhaps because they already saw him as the moderate African who could manage independence without threatening British interests. The puppet of post-colonial transition. When Kenyatta was released in 1961, the world had changed. The Mau Mau had been crushed, and Britain was preparing to decolonize Africa. The British needed a dependable African elite to hand over power to, someone who would maintain order, protect foreign investments, and suppress radical nationalism. Kenyatta fit the role perfectly. He promised forgiveness and reconciliation, ensuring that white settlers would keep their vast land holdings. The independence negotiations that followed were heavily tilted in favor of the colonial elite. When Kenya finally gained independence in 1963, Kenyatta's Kenya African National Union, KANU, government inherited not freedom for the people, but the colonial state itself, its structure, its bureaucracy, and its capitalist inequalities. The betrayal of the freedom struggle. After independence, Kenyatta's administration quickly revealed its true colors. Land that Mau Mau fighters had died for was not redistributed to the peasants, but sold to wealthy elites and loyalists through government schemes like the Million-Acre Settlement. The same colonial system of privilege persisted, only now under African faces. Those who criticized the regime, such as Bildad Kagia and Oginga Odinga, were marginalized or silenced. Kenyatta cultivated a cult of personality, declaring himself Mzee, while promoting his Kikuyu allies into key government positions. Corruption, tribalism, and repression flourished. Under Kenyatta, Kenya became a neo-colonial state tied economically to Britain and the West. British companies continued to control agriculture, finance, and trade. The dream of true independence, uhuru na mashamba, freedom and land, remained unfulfilled. The fighters who had sacrificed everything were left destitute, while Kenyatta's family amassed vast estates across the Rift Valley and central Kenya. Legacy of a manufactured hero. By the time of his death in 1978, Jomo Kenyatta had transformed from a colonial collaborator into an untouchable national icon. His image was enshrined in monuments, currency, and school books as the father of the nation. Yet for many Kenyans, especially the descendants of Mau Mau fighters and the landless poor, he remains a symbol of betrayal, a man who took the fruits of their struggle and handed them back to the very system they fought to destroy. The truth about Jomo Kenyatta is neither simple nor flattering. He was a skilled politician, yes, but also a pragmatist who compromised liberation for power. The British needed a puppet to safeguard their post-colonial interests, and Kenyatta played that role with remarkable precision. His story is a cautionary tale of how colonialism did not end with independence, it merely changed its face. If you like these videos and would like to support in their continued production, you can do so by joining our membership. Click the join button below, or you can support by buying a super thanks below. That is all we had for you today. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Thanks for watching. We will see you on the next one.